We all tend to think that in a messy custody battle, a child's voice should be the clearest guide, right? But what if that voice isn't entirely their own? New court guidelines are now forcing us to listen much, much closer, to decode what's being said and sometimes what's being coached. So let's dive into this. It's a sensitive topic, for sure, but an absolutely crucial one. Here it is, the question at the heart of so many of these painful legal fights. Is that child expressing what they truly want, or are they just echoing something they've been taught to say? Well, the courts are finally getting a new framework to help them figure that out.
Wow. I mean, just let that sink in. Pawns in the game of emotional chess. That quote comes directly from the new guidelines themselves. It's a stunningly honest admission of what we all know happens. Kids get caught in the middle, used as weapons in a war between their parents, and the emotional fallout is just devastating.
Okay, so let's start with a child's words in court. For the longest time, the approach was pretty straightforward. A judge listens carefully to what the child wants. But these new guidelines recognize a really difficult truth. A child's testimony might not be the whole story. The court now has a duty to look deeper.
And this brings us to a really serious issue the courts are now being trained to identify: parental manipulation. The guidelines call it, very bluntly, mind poisoning. And yeah, it's as awful as it sounds. We're talking about a deliberate campaign by one parent to turn their child against the other.
The official term for this is Parental Alienation Syndrome, or PAS. And we need to be clear, this isn't just about a parent being angry or saying a few bad things. It's a complex, calculated process where a child's love for one parent is systematically worn down and replaced with fear or even hatred, often for no good reason at all.
So, you're probably wondering, how does this actually happen? Well, the guidelines list some very specific, toxic behaviors. Things like constantly lying to the child, blocking phone calls from the other parent, preventing them from showing up to school events, and it can get even uglier, like filing completely false complaints to create a fake story of abuse or neglect. And the stakes here, they could not be higher. This is not just about winning a custody case. The guidelines warn that for the child, the long-term damage can be catastrophic. We're talking a potential lifetime of severe issues. And that right there is exactly why the courts are taking this so seriously now.
So, if a child's words can be manipulated, how in the world does a court find the truth? That's the big question, isn't it? Well, the guidelines lay out a clear process for investigation, one that goes way beyond surface-level testimony to uncover how the child really feels.
This is the challenge for any judge. You might have a child who presents this very convincing, detailed list of complaints against a parent. But is that their own experience speaking? Or is it a script they've learned by heart?
The first major tool the court can use is a psychological evaluation. And this isn't just for the child, it's often for the entire family. The whole point is to get a complete 360-degree picture of the family dynamics and the psychological health of each parent.
And the approach is different for kids and adults, which is pretty smart. For the child, experts often use something called play therapy. Kids can't always put their feelings into words, but they can express them through play. It's a great way to spot signs of stress or coercion. For the parents, they use standard psychological tests to identify personality traits that might point to manipulative behavior.
Now, the court's cautious approach here isn't just a hunch, it's grounded in decades of psychological research. The guidelines actually cite scientific studies to explain why a child's memory can be so unreliable, especially when they're under pressure.
In fact, there's a whole section in the guidelines called the Genesis of False Accusation. It shows that the courts now understand how shockingly easy it can be to influence a child's mind to create detailed, convincing, but completely false memories of things that never actually happened.
Just take the famous mousetrap study. It's wild. Researchers just repeatedly asked kids to imagine getting their finger caught in a mousetrap. After several sessions, more than half of them had created these vivid, detailed memories of this thing happening, an event that was totally made up. They insisted it was real, even when they were told it wasn't.
The guidelines make the connection crystal clear. They bring up a similar study and then drop this bombshell of a quote. Substitute mommy or daddy for Sam Stone, and you begin to see how children can be manipulated. If a child can be convinced that a stranger did something minor, just imagine what can happen when a trusted parent is the one planting the ideas. This isn't just a guess, it's a known psychological phenomenon.
So when you get right down to it, this entire framework isn't about punishing parents. It's about protecting the child. This final section outlines the court's most important duty: and the steps it can take to actually fulfill it.
And here it is, the guiding principle behind everything. The court's #1 job is to protect the child's fundamental right to love and be loved by both parents. That's seen as essential to their well-being, no matter how bad the conflict between the adults gets.
And to make sure this happens, the court has a set of tools that escalate if the behavior continues. It can start by awarding extra access time to the parent who's been cut off. It can then impose heavy fines for violating orders. It can direct the alienating parent to get counseling, and in really severe and ongoing cases, it can take the ultimate step of changing who has primary custody.
The guidelines end with this incredibly powerful statement. It's a reminder that the goal of every single custody decision has to be the child's long-term health. The legal fight will eventually be over, but the emotional foundation that's laid in childhood, well, that lasts a lifetime.
And so that leaves us with this one last vital question. These guidelines are a massive step in the right direction, there's no doubt about it, but the challenge is still there. If we know a child's words can be shaped, how do we make sure the law continues to evolve to protect not just their voice, but their truth?